Hello, everybody, and welcome to this session on lifting and shifting the Oracle SOA 11G platform to the Oracle SOA Cloud Service. So today I'm going to talk a little bit about why and how you'd want to shift SOA 11G to the Oracle SOA Cloud. This is also equally applicable to if you're on 12.1.3. And equally, even if you're on 12.2.1 and you want to move 12.2.1 into the cloud. Before we begin, just I guess give a little introduction to myself and Rubicon Red. So my name is Matt Wright. I'm the CTO and co-founder of Rubicon Red. We're very much specialists in the Oracle middleware and Oracle Cloud platforms, so particularly IaaS and PaaS. And really, we pride ourselves on our thought leadership, our innovation, and unrivaled expertise. So many of you, no doubt, will have seen some of the books that we published. We published multiple books and obviously many blogs as well, and participate in many of the Oracle Global Advisory Boards. On the innovative side of things, we've done a number of notable firsts, firstly on-prem, but more recently in the cloud. We're the first Oracle chatbot implementation globally to go live, the first Oracle SOA 12c implementation in the cloud, first to go live on the Java Cloud Service in APAC, etc. And what we're particularly proud of is the number of innovation awards that our customers have picked up over the years. We like to work very, very closely with our customers to obviously ensure their success and love to see that recognized by Oracle. And finally, on the expertise side, you'll see that obviously we've got platinum specialization in a number of areas, both the core on-prem technology from the Oracle sort of SOA BPM stack downwards, and obviously more recently on the Oracle Cloud Stack. We're one of only literally a handful of vendors that have those specializations globally. In terms of what we do a number of things. We do professional services, as you could imagine. So we go in and we work with customers to help them implement their Oracle middleware and Oracle Cloud Platform solutions. We also provide an ongoing sort of managed service where we provide that 24/7 operational management of their platform, both on-premise and in the cloud. And finally, we also take to market MIST, our DevOps software solution for the Oracle Cloud and Oracle middleware. And really one of our core specialities is around DevOps and how we help you to get solutions quickly and easily into production and obviously manage that ongoing configuration. And we'll be talking a little bit about MIST tonight because essentially that's some of the tooling that we use to really sort of accelerate and automate the process of migrating from 11G into the Oracle Cloud. From a customer perspective, we work with customers globally all around the world. As you can see, we're predominantly based in Australia itself, with offices up and down the East Coast, an office in Hyderabad in India, and also a small office in Redwood Shores, literally just down the road from Oracle. But as you can see, we do tend to work globally with our customers, and I'm very proud, obviously, of the customer base that we do have. So with that quick intro out of the way, really on to the main topic of tonight, and obviously talking about moving Oracle SOA into the cloud and why you'd want to do that as well and how you'd go about it. So I think the obvious thing here is obviously cloud adoption is growing. It's growing very, very rapidly, both at the software as a service layer, the platform as a service layer, and the infrastructure as a service layer. And that is obviously going to continue, that acceleration, and basically over sort of probably the next 10 plus years, many organizations are going to transform almost totally to the cloud in some shape or form. So what does that mean? Well, from an integration point of view, it's obviously an interesting thing because we're used to integrating predominantly on-premise applications with on-premise applications. We may do some B2B integration where we're integrating with other partners in our supply chain, for example, but very much it's from our data center to their data center. But as we're seeing more and more of the applications that we're using on-premise are being replaced with SaaS solutions in terms of sort of, COTS solutions such as your CRM, your finance, your HCM, etc., all very much moving to the cloud, but also the bespoke applications that you've implemented. Many of those are also moving to the cloud. Now, some of them may not. Things such as the mainframe in particular may take a bit longer, but we're very much ending up with a hybrid cloud. And what that typically means is, from an integration point of view, we want the ability to obviously integrate on-prem with on-prem still, but very much on-premise with the cloud and also cloud to cloud. And based on the nature of that, there's really a key here is, well, where do I put my integration hub? Do I keep that on premise? Do I have that in the cloud? Do I have multiple hubs, one in cloud, one on premise, etc.? But essentially what we're seeing is more and more of those integrations, rather than living and executing on premise, we want them to execute in the cloud. And obviously one way of doing that is taking the tried and tested technologies such as the Oracle SOA suite and migrating that with our integrations to the cloud as appropriate. So that's one of the key drivers that we're very much seeing today. But I think we then need to look into a couple of other things as well. A lot of customers we still talk to are either on 11G or even on 12.1.3, so not on the latest version of 12.2.1. And obviously with 11G and 12.1.3, Premier support is essentially coming to an end at the end of this year. So really, for a lot of customers, it's reaching the point where they really do need to think about upgrading. Otherwise, the level of support obviously drops. There's going to be no new patch releases. Obviously, things such as security patches become even more critical. So it's really important to get onto a supported version of the Oracle middleware stack. But in addition to that, if we look at 12c, it brings a lot of benefits. And a lot of those benefits are very applicable to the cloud world that we live in terms of obviously being able to support things such as REST-based integration, simple integration with SaaS applications, the various cloud adapters that come out of the box, managed file transfer, etc. All of that goodness is in the 12c platform, as well as obviously additional new features to make it even quicker and easier to implement those integrations. Obviously ongoing bug fixes and support for JDK8, which again opens up other possibilities for you. So there's a lot of very good practical reasons to move to 12c. In addition, when we say, well, why move the Oracle SOA suite itself to the cloud? Why not keep that on premise? And I guess it's almost, well, why move to the cloud at all? And really one of the key things here that we're looking at from a cloud perspective is really around, what does it mean? Well, agility is a key one. The ability for business to develop solutions and get them out into production quicker and faster than ever before becomes absolutely, it's becoming more and more critical. We're seeing the likes of, obviously, the Netflix completely upend the TV, the film industry, etc. And we see those sort of, Uber in the taxi side, for example. We see that across multiple industries where the ability for a company to innovate and innovate quickly is key to competition. And obviously, IT software provides a large part of that innovation piece. The cloud gives you that ability to sort of spin up solutions and dial them down when you don't need them, to experiment, to do these things at minimal cost, at minimal risk. But if it works, then obviously scale is required. The other thing that we're really sort of seeing that goes hand in hand with moving to the cloud and really getting that agility, that reduced risk, etc., and reduced cost is DevOps and release automation. So the ability to manage releases and deliver lots and lots of releases in very, very small increments, very, very quickly over a long period of time. So you can continually be innovating, continually delivering new capability, seeing how it works, getting that feedback and managing that process. Long has gone the day of those very long waterfall projects. Even 4, 5, 6 months for a project is an awful long time these days. So there's a lot of very good reasons for moving to the cloud, and really that also applies to the SOA suite in terms of moving it there to take advantage of DevOps and release automation, both around the underlying infrastructure as well as SOA suite itself, and also, as we saw, to put the integration in the right place. If we're doing SaaS to SaaS integration, then having our integration hub in the cloud can also make a lot of sense. So now we sort of understand the reasons behind why we might want to do that. Well, what's involved? We've done an awful lot of 11G to 12C migrations for our customers. Some of those very much into the cloud, some have chosen to stay on premise. So there's two things really: what's involved in going from 11G to 12C, and what's involved in moving to the cloud. And really want to obviously touch on both of those aspects as part of this presentation today. So when we look at what's involved in going from 11G to 12C, and obviously those of you who are on this call and were there on 10G and have been through the 10G to 11G upgrade, you know it can be extremely, a manual process. So there's a lot of manual tasks, repetitive tasks involved. So very resource intensive, very time consuming, very, very expensive, and error prone. And really, when we look to go into 11G to 12C, it's not such a big an upgrade as going from 10G to 11G. We're still on the same basic architecture, but there's still quite a few steps involved. So the most obvious one is we've got to obviously start by provisioning the infrastructure that we're going to use for SOA 12C, and that's if we're staying on premise. Essentially, typically when we see most customers do this, they've had 11G up and running for many years, maybe 5 years, 6, 7 years, etc. And as part of what they're doing is they do a hardware refresh at the same time. So you've got to get in, order the new hardware, procure that, get it in, get it installed, get it configured. That's obviously the virtual machines. Typically, most customers are on VMs these days, not pure physical hardware, but there's all the shared storage, the network, the database. And that on its own, before you even got anywhere near the Oracle middleware, can be very time consuming. And obviously investing in new hardware can obviously be very expensive as well. Once you got that in place, the next step is obviously to provision your sort of Oracle SOA 12C platform. And what I guess a lot of customers don't think initially, think, okay, well, I'm just going to go ahead and install Oracle SOA 12C. I'll follow the Oracle Enterprise Deployment Guide, the EDG, and away I go. Now, if you've ever read that, that's obviously several hundred pages, and someone who knows what they're doing, they can probably breeze through that in maybe 4 or 5 days. Often we see customers taking 2 weeks or longer per environment, and typically you want multiple environments here. You've obviously got your production set up to get right, but typically you want a number of a dev environment for migrating your code and a number of test environments as well. So that all takes time to set up. But the area that we see that a lot of customers don't really think about is the work involved in actually migrating all your configuration from 11G to 12C. So as you've developed your integrations over time and deployed them to your 11G platform, you've gone in and you've been configuring that on an ongoing basis. So that's things like all your underlying data sources, your JMS, queues, topics, etc., adapters, any custom jars or libraries, login. There's a whole set of configuration that you've got there. Now, typically, I haven't met a customer yet who's actually got an accurate record that says exactly what all those configurations are. So when you come to reproduce them in your 12C environment, because you're going to need them all to be there to support the code that you're migrating, it's a very, very manual process of doing that. You've literally got to go through your WebLogic console, pull out all those configurations, and then rekey them in. And obviously you have to do that in your dev environment, your various test environments, your prod environment. So it's very slow. it's very easy to make an error. It's very easy to get things different across environments, and obviously inconsistency in configuration across environments is a real pain. It can result in both things working one way correctly in one environment but not in another. It's also a key reason why DR often fails, is where the configuration of the DR isn't the same as prod itself. So that's an area where customers tend to think about, tend to overlook what they need to do. The other is upgrading the next step then is upgrading the source code from 11G to 12C. That's your SOA, your OSB, your BPM, your BAM, etc. Now that tends to be, at least on the surface, relatively straightforward. You can open your SOA code in JDeveloper 12C and it will upgrade it for you to a 12C version. Or if it's OSB, you export it from Eclipse and import it into JDeveloper. But there are known issues. There are quite a few corner cases where the upgraded code won't work, or won't work in the way that you would expect it to straight away. So you need to go in and basically refactor around the source code around those known issues. Once you've done that, it's obviously you're building it, deploying it, and configuring it, and promoting it from dev through to test into production. And as you're doing that, obviously testing it as you go. So again, a lot of work there involved in doing that and validating that. Ensure testing can be very involved, particularly if you haven't got automated tests. If you have, that's going to be a big help. But really ensuring that you've got the right configuration in every environment. So a test, if it fails, it's failing because there's something wrong with the code rather than the configuration reason, because otherwise you're wasting time trying to troubleshoot a config issue, which you really didn't want to have there in the first place. Once you've done all that, you're obviously in a position to go live. But as I said, it's a very manual process from start to finish. So you can have very long delivery times. Obviously, there's risks of delays. And if you get something wrong and something doesn't work as expected in production, then obviously that could have a financial impact potentially, and or a brand impact, depending on obviously how public that is. So let's look at how can we solve those issues and how can we make it a lot easier. So as I mentioned at the start, one of our key things that we do as an organization is DevOps around the Oracle middleware and the Oracle cloud space. And we have our own solution that we use and other customers use to really sort of simplify DevOps as a whole from a middleware perspective, but it's really helpful when it comes to doing the migration. And it really helps provide that, one set of tools, if you like, for doing the migrating from 11G to 12C. But once you've done it, you can continue to leverage it for ongoing, DevOps around ongoing config management and application release automation. And we'll talk a little bit about that at the end of this, but really want to focus on the migration piece. So if you look at it, there's really a couple of things that we do that really sort of helps here that I'll talk about. First, it's the ability of the tool to introspect your existing 11G environment and basically suck out all that configuration that we need to migrate. So once we've pulled that configuration out, the next step is to say, okay, well, we use the term blueprint. A blueprint essentially defines what it is, that's our specification for what needs to be provisioned and all the configuration that goes with it. So we take that, essentially suck out that configuration and create an 11G blueprint. We then upgrade that to a 12C compatible blueprint, and then click a button, we can actually provision that environment into the cloud or update an existing environment with that configuration. And we'll sort of come into a bit more detail later. So that really dramatically simplifies that platform migration piece, which is sort of the first key area that you need to look at. The second key area is obviously that code migration. And it's really in particular around the ability to automate both the build, deployment, and configuration of that upgraded code. And again, promote that in a way through your test environments and leverage automated testing where appropriate to really, reduce the manual effort as far as possible and really focus on just the process of making sure that you've thoroughly tested it and promoted it through. Key thing here is that the approach that we use is actually infrastructure independent. So, it does work if you just want to stay on premise. It also means that in the future, if you want to move from one cloud provider to another, it gives you a simple pathway for doing that as well. So there's no cloud lock-in. And it also provides an ability to obviously recover very quickly in a different availability domain or zone. So it can be very useful as a potential DR recovery option. So if I talk through the steps very, very briefly, really, as I said, on-premise, usually very, very manual. It's getting the infrastructure in place to begin with. That's purchasing the hardware, installing it, configuring it, etc. As well as obviously things like the network and the database. In the cloud world, you still need that infrastructure, but because it's infrastructure as a service, it's usually very easy to either set up, even if you're going in and doing it manually through the sort of the browser-based UIs that you're given, but typically you're going to automate it, so it becomes very easy and very repetitive to do. Things you need to think about is obviously connectivity to your own data center, whether that's VPN or something like Fast Connect or Direct Connect, depending on exactly which cloud you're going with. But that's typically a one-time job, for everything you're doing within that cloud. It's not specific to Oracle SOA. Other things to think about is obviously setting up security, so your security groups, your roles, your users. Again, your networking configuration within the cloud, your shared storage, etc. Again, all typically very, very repetitive, easy and repetitive to do. Now, depending on whether you're going with, on infrastructure as a service for the SOA suite, or you're going on the Oracle SOA Cloud service, and there's basically pros and cons of the two. You may or may not have to set up the compute and configure the OS directly, and we'll touch on that on the next slide. And finally, there's creating the database cloud service. So step 2 is when we really sort of get specific to the Oracle SOA suite. And if you go with the Oracle SOA Cloud service, that really provides a very simple and easy way to get going. Obviously, it will automatically provision that infrastructure for you. It supports the core, the vast majority of components that people use, namely BPOL, OSB, and B2B. So BPOL, I mean, SCAR composites. It is a fairly sort of fixed topology, one size fits all. But it does have no support for things such as BPM and BAM. So if you want those other components, or you want a slightly different topology, you want more flexibility, then the alternative is to go with infrastructure as a service. I.e., you put it on cloud compute. Obviously, that way you've got full support, you've got completely flexible topology as long as you really stay within the enterprise deployment guide. But you do need to manually, or you do need to provision the Oracle compute. You can do that manually, or again, you can automate that. Again, typically we'd recommend automating it. It keeps it a lot simpler. And then from that, as I show you later, we can then do the automated provisioning component. So if you then need to automate the provisioning of, say, BPM or just ADF or WebLogic, for example, you can do that very, very quickly with the Rubicon Red Mist product that I'll talk about in a bit. So next bit is really migrating the configurations. And this is the bit where, we're taking the 11G config that we need and moving that to our cloud platform. And really, this is where we leverage Mist, our DevOps solution, to do this. And really, the way that it works is we have the concept of a blueprint, which defines everything you want to know about your Oracle middleware configuration. So it's topology, it's architecture, your cluster shape, which products, which versions, all your configurations such as data sources, JMS, etc. That all goes in the blueprint, and from that, we can use that blueprint to basically spin up new environments as we need to. For each environment, we create what we call a model, platform model, and that's just really capturing the environment-specific configuration information, such as the host servers that it's being deployed to, the database instance that it's using for the dehydration store, for example. So when we're migrating from 11G to 12C, what we really do is we use Mist to introspect that 11G production environment, and that will create 11G blueprint. We then upgrade that blueprint to 12C, And then once we've got that 12C blueprint, we just create a platform model for each of the environments that we have, and then spin them up at the push of a button. And we've literally at that point migrated the 11G platform and its configuration. The code has to come later from 11G to 12C. So what I'm going to do is just take you through a very, very quick demo just to show you how quickly and easily you can do that. Literally takes about 5 minutes, and then we'll come back to the rest of the migration process. So we've already got an 11G environment up and running. I'm going to use the Smart Inspector to essentially introspect that and pull that in and create a platform blueprint. That will be an 11G platform blueprint. I'm then going to upgrade that blueprint to a 12C blueprint, create a platform model to map it to my target infrastructure, so my compute, and then at the push of a button, Mist will automatically provision that for me. And the provisioning piece takes about 45 minutes to basically create the domain, configure it, and start it up. So we won't see that at the end of this demo for time's sake, but you'll really get the idea of how simple and quickly we can do it. So with that, let me switch into the Mist console. So Mist can either run in the cloud or on-prem. I'm running it in the cloud here for our purposes. And really what I'm going to do here is just create a platform blueprint, as I talked about, of my old 11G SOA. And I'm going to do that by introspecting an existing one. So I've already defined the host that it's running on in Mist. And all I need to do now is specify the domain home directory that it lives in. And I'll click on that and click introspect. And that's going to go away and pull out that information, which is done now. It will give me some summary info here, and then I can click finish. And that's going to go away and now generate that platform blueprint for me. And that's what I can see here. And really, if I look in here, the key components are in the configuration tree here. So I can drill into this and really see details of all my configurations. So for example, I can come in here and sort of see, here are the data sources that it pulled out. For example, you may notice that some of these data sources on the left-hand side, some are color-coded white, others are green. So the green ones are out the box ones that 11G requires. The white ones are our custom ones. And obviously when we migrate, we only want to migrate the configuration that's specific to us and layer that on top of the 12C configurations. So I'll leave that as is again. And what I'm going to do now is come back and create a platform blueprint for my new 12C, so new SOA 12C environment. And I'm going to do it by upgrading my 11G blueprint. So I've got my old 11G blueprint that I'm upgrading, and I'm going to upgrade that to 12.213. Click next. Again, it will give me a summary. And then it's going to open the create a new platform blueprint for me that I can see here. Again, if I open my thing, I can see I've got all that configuration information. Key thing here, you'll see now I've gone from 12 data sources to 16 data sources. So I've got the 3 ones that are specific to me that have come across, but within 12C, there's actually additional data sources that SOA has, and there's some that have disappeared and some new ones that have come as well. So Mist has respected that. It's brought across my custom configuration and overlaid it on top of what's required for 12C. So I'm happy with that. I'm not going to make any changes at this point because for speed reasons. So I just call it V1 and I'll commit that. So again, we have complete version control over this so that you can roll forward and roll back to previous versions. So in order to provision my SOA 12C instance in the cloud, I need to create a platform model that's going to do that. And I'm going to put that in my SIT environment, and I'll call it SOA 12C SIT migrated. Hit next. I'm going to put that in my Oracle Cloud and click next. I'm going to have a 2-node topology here. Click next. It will default the IP addresses because we're actually going to create the compute on demand in this case. Click next. And really the key information here that I have to do is specify the things that are particular to this particular platform model. So it's like credentials and database details. So let me just do that. Put in the database host. RCU prefix. So I'll do MO. Okay, hold on. Make sure you get the password right. All passwords are fully encrypted. Next, and it gives me a summary. I'm okay with that. And again, now it's going to create me a platform model, which is essentially the blueprint overlaid with all the model specific information. I can click commit here without making any changes. I can make changes later if I want to. And then if I come back to my platform models, I can see it here, my newly created platform model. I'm now ready to actually just provision that instance directly into the cloud. So first test and click finish. And Mist will now go away and actually start the process of basically installing, provisioning, and configuring my SOA 12c instance in the Oracle Cloud. And really the key thing here, as I explained, is, you know, we've used the Smart Inspector to suck out all the configuration information from our 11G environment to create 11G platform blueprint. We then upgraded that to a 12C blueprint, created a platform model to map it a specific set of computes that we wanted to create the SOA 12C instance on in the cloud, and then we click provision. And that's really, that is the end-to-end process. The alternative approach here is you just provision the actual SOA 12C vanilla environment first, and then do an update to actually update the configuration on top of that SOA 12C instance. So depending on whether you're going for IaaS or SOA CS, you can take either approach. So I'll leave it at that because we're obviously strapped for time here a bit, and we'll sort of go on to the next step, which is really upgrading from 11G to 12C, upgrading the source code. And key things here to appreciate is, firstly, there's no fundamental changes in the underlying platform. So 10G to 11G, there were some fairly significant changes. 11G to 12C is a lot more straightforward from that point of view. It's the same architecture. Those of you who are more familiar with OSB or do a lot of work with OSB in particular will notice now that, you know, Oracle's got a single IDE, JDeveloper. So if you'll be moving essentially off Eclipse onto JDeveloper. In terms of doing the upgrade, you can literally open the 11G project in JDeveloper and it will convert it to a 12C project, and then you just save it. If you're doing it from within, you know, an OSB project, then you literally, you know, you export it from Eclipse and then import it into JDeveloper, and essentially the same thing happens. Now, if you're doing that, if you only got, say, 10, 20, 30 projects to do, then you can do that by hand. You know, in many cases, we work with customers who've got, you know, 500, 1,000, 2,000 of these that they're looking to migrate. So it's actually very easy to automate that as well, rather than having to go through and open them all individually one by one. So again, we'd recommend that you do that, and there's documentation in the Oracle manuals on how to do that. Once you've upgraded the code, then there are quite a lot of corner cases that you need to deal with, depending on whether it's the OSB code, the BPL code, BPM, etc. So you need to obviously go through your code and check for those compatibility issues, and if it does have that, then obviously update it accordingly. Mapping in particular is probably one of those key areas. You know, XQuery and XSLT have both moved on to newer versions. Some functions have been removed or deprecated, or some of them behave slightly differently, particularly in terms of how it treats empty values or defaults. So you need to essentially go through them and make sure that your code, even though it will typically have been converted and will build, that it behaves in the way that you're expecting it to behave at runtime. Again, we internally have a big knowledge base that we use to go through and do this, and so can sort of get into that in more detail another time. Once you've done that, it really is a case of then obviously building and deploying and configuring each of those artifacts. And once you've done that, essentially testing it. And really typically we sort of see, you do a number of bits of testing. You obviously do the unit testing. You typically do some level of system integration testing, and obviously either UAT or pre-production testing. I mean, user acceptance testing probably isn't the right term, because the users have already accepted it once. What you're testing though is it's performing the same way that it did in the 11G environment, that you're not getting any changes in behavior, at least none that you are undesirable. Again, from a MIST point of view, it's very, very quick and easy to actually automate the build. So pulling the source code from, say, something like Subversion or Git, building that through Maven, but then pushing that through a release pipeline to manage the ongoing deployment and configuration of that code, and the ability to essentially, again, introspect the code to pull out properties. So once you've done that, you've got the unit test passed. Really the key thing here is managing that whole process of testing and promoting code through your release pipeline, from dev into test into your sort of staging area before pushing into production. Typically here, rather than going big bang, you may want to consider splitting it up into chunks of functionality. So making sure you've got the ability and the control to actually, deploy that in a piecemeal fashion to go live in a staged approach, while sort of turning off some of the 11G components at the same time. Again, won't get into a demo today, but that's something that MIST can help you do. A key thing here, though, as I said, is testing. If you've got any automated tests already from when you did originally built and deployed it on the 11G, then hooking those tests into the platform can really obviously dramatically accelerate and improve the overall quality of testing there as well. And finally, all you need to do is go live. So, really just to sort of highlight the key steps that we went through there, it's sort of configuring that cloud infrastructure. Again, you can automate most of that using tools such as Terraform, for example. Once you've got your basic infrastructure in place, you're now ready to put your SOA infrastructure in place. The key thing really is around how you migrate your platform configurations across from your 11G environment to 12C. And obviously that's what we showed in the demo there, was the ability to introspect that, suck it out, and then reapply it to your 12C environment. Upgrading the code to 12C. And really the key thing here is having the knowledge around being able to refactor the code as needed so that it behaves in the same way. So as I said, there's a lot of known gotchas there. It's a case of working through all of those for your code base. And really the key thing where you can save a lot of time is obviously around automating the build deployment, in particular the configuration of the code. Again, when you're doing it manually, it's very error prone and very easy to make a mistake and therefore invalidate your tests and having to repeat them. And what we find obviously with an upgrade, testing is very expensive. It's a lot of it. So the more you can do to optimize that, the better. And obviously if you're migrating hundreds or more composites and you're trying to do all of that manually, it can be very time consuming and error prone. So automation really can simplify that and dramatically improve it. And then you're live. And I think the key thing here, once you're live, you're obviously going to continue to implement new integrations, or maybe update existing integrations where you're replacing an on-premise solution on one end of it with a SaaS solution. So having that ongoing DevOps capability to continue to manage that configuration, continue to manage that automated deployment, really helps give some of those benefits that you get from running in the cloud. So really, the benefits that we see in sort of taking this approach, and when we sort of talk to the customers that we've worked here, is obviously, Whole thing here is, it's speeding up that delivery time and reducing risk by accelerating that migration through automation. As we've touched upon, manual migrations are very, very error prone. And just one failed deployment in production could have a huge cost either financially or on the brand. What we typically see on the ground is literally, and these are numbers that we pulled from working with our customers, is that the time it takes to actually migrate the 11G platform and the configurations to the new SOA 12C platform, it's reduced by at least 95%, if not more. Again, similar reduction in the time spent on building, deploying, remediating code. Again, because the issues that you're finding now tend to be code issues rather than deployment or configuration issues, you have a far smaller subset of issues, and you're able to fix them once and then move on. Other thing is test time. We've seen it many times where the test team has been standing, waiting for the next deployment into their environment, and the deployment is taking days, for example, due to config issues. If you're able to automate that, you prevent those scenarios from occurring. So again, it can have a massive reduction in the test team idle time there as well. And again, automated testing can reduce that further. Key things here is obviously, what we're seeing again and again is obviously the time to market is critical. So the ability to get your 11G platform into the cloud quickly and with reduced risk, reduced cost is key. Once you're there, though, you then have access to all the additional Oracle PaaS services and the ability that gives you and the agility that gives you. So being able to embrace the cloud and DevOps, it basically does provide you then with that advantage to be able to be a lot more responsive in how you go to market and the service that you provide to your customers. So with that, we're just about on time. There is a few minutes left. If there are any questions, please feel free to ask them, and I'll look to answer them if possible over the chat. In the meantime, if you have any questions after the webinar is over, or if you're listening to the recording, then please feel to go to rubiconred.com, contact us, and just submit the inquiry form. More than happy to ask any questions that are posted there. If you'd like to see a more detailed demo of Mist itself, and we use that for a migration point of view, then go to mist.rubiconred.com/request-demo, and we'll be more than happy to give you a far more detailed demo than the one that we showed you tonight. Okay, looks like there are no questions. I trust that you found the session useful, and look forward to hearing from any of you if you have any additional questions. With that, I think I'll wrap up the call. Okay, bye for now.